I'm Heidi Shoup, the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council of Washington, and I want to welcome you here to the Council's evening Meet the Author presentation. Upcoming Council events include a briefing and cultural evening at the Embassy of Indonesia on June 14th, a foreign policy series event with the Secure America Project on June 19th entitled Disengagement from Iraq, a Vital Step Toward Winning the Fight Against Terrorism, ? Speakers that evening include Martin Halperin, Major General retired William Nash, and Ambassador Edward Pack. And on June 28th, we have a book signing with Josh Rushing, former Marine spokesperson and now reporter with Al Jazeera News Network, discussing his new book, Mission Al Jazeera, Build a Bridge, Seek the Truth, Change the World. I ask, as always, that cell phones be turned off at this time as a courtesy to our speakers and to your fellow audience. Tonight we host 4 of the 14 authors of a new book, Liberty Under Attack, Reclaiming Our Freedoms in an Age of Terror. They are an extraordinary group of legal experts, and we are indeed fortunate to have them with us this evening. At the close of the Constitutional Convention in 1787, Benjamin Franklin, when queried as he left Independence Hall on the final day of deliberation by a woman who asked him, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" replied, "A republic if you can keep it." A republic, of course, is defined as a political order in which the supreme power lies in a body of citizens who are entitled to vote for officers and representatives responsible to them. And in order for citizens to make wise choices, they must have timely and reliable information. John Podesta, in his chapter of this book that we're talking about tonight, quotes James Madison, who said, quote, a popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to farce or tragedy, or perhaps both. How close this country is to that situation is one of the themes examined by our authors here this evening. More than a century and a half after Madison and Franklin, Dwight Eisenhower, on leaving the office of president in 1961, left us with these parting words, warning of the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power in the rising influence of what he identified as the military-industrial complex. He said, "We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together." Today, as politics, technological advances, religious fundamentalism of all persuasions, and news as profitable entertainment combine to present Americans with what seems unfathomable dilemmas, when increasing numbers of Americans can name the winner of American Idol but cannot begin to identify the impact that John Woo has had on the American presidential power, it is perhaps not out of place to suggest that a closer examination of what is being done in the name of America and her citizens is in order. This book is an important step in that direction. It is perhaps long past time to resurrect the advice of yet another president, Ronald Reagan, who preferred to trust but verify. Our moderator this evening is Greg Anrig, Jr. He has been Vice President of Programs at the Century Foundation since 1994. In that role, he supervises the creation and progress of the Foundation's projects, which focus on U.S. policy related to economic and social inequality, the aging of the population, homeland security, and certain international issues. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our authors.
Thank you very much, and thank you as well, Heidi, and the World Affairs Council for having us. We're thrilled to be here to talk about this book, and we're also thrilled the air conditioning is working so well, so we can enjoy ourselves here. How many of you watched the Republican presidential debate a couple weeks ago? Anybody? A few people, actually more than I might have guessed, but there was a moment in that debate where the moderator, Britt Hume, posed the proverbial ticking time bomb question to the candidates. There have been a series of attacks. You had people in custody that you thought might have information about how to prevent the next one. What would you authorize your interrogators to do in terms of getting that information? And of the major candidates, only John McCain expressed that he would adhere to the Geneva Conventions. The other candidates really engaged in a kind of bidding war to talk about how abusive they'd be willing to be under those circumstances. Rudy Giuliani said he would tell the interrogators to use every method, It shouldn't be torture, but every method they could think of. Mitt Romney said, we ought to double Guantanamo, whatever that means. And that enhanced interrogation techniques have to be used. Tom Tancredo said, we're wondering about whether waterboarding would be a bad thing to do. I'm looking for Jack Bauer at that time, let me tell you. The crowd laughed uproariously and cheered. I think it's safe to say none of those candidates nor the crowd had read Liberty Under Attack. Because if they had, they would know that there has been extensive experience since 9/11 with exactly the kinds of techniques that they were talking about, and that it's been an utter failure by any measure that you want to consider. It's diminished America's hard-won moral standing that we've devoted decades to in leading the world toward advancements on human rights. I might mention that when Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, his confession came out a short while ago, in which he said he was the mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks. He was involved in the Daniel Pearl murders. He was involved in other terrorism attacks. That the response internationally was to focus primarily on how he was questioned during the course of obtaining that confession, that torture was involved in that process, and that was the focus of how the international community reacted to the confession of the mastermind of 9/11. And that, I think, is a good indicator of how counterproductive torture can be and these kinds of interrogation techniques in terms of undercutting our standing internationally. It also has incited more people to join the jihadist movement. The photos from Abu Ghraib have been recruitment tools for Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations. And it fails to produce useful information. You may have seen the front page story in the New York Times a couple of days ago about a committee that looked into how questioning has been undertaken by the United States and found that the approaches used are outmoded, amateurish, and unreliable. They haven't produced any reliable information at all. So it's what you will find again and again in this volume of essays that we've put together is virtually every area where civil liberties have been abridged since 9/11, and torture is just one of those realms. The costs relative to the benefits, as best we can tell, and it's difficult to tell because there's been a great deal of secrecy shrouding all that's going on, but the costs clearly outweigh the benefits in just about all the realms, from a security standpoint as well as the standpoint of securing freedoms that have become so important to this country. The premise underlying our book is that when the United States has successfully faced up to challenges in the past, it's been done by when our leaders have educated the public honestly about the nature of the problem, when they've welcomed open and informed debate, when they genuinely have attempted to unite rather than divide people in the country, when we openly face up to the nature of the dangers that we're facing as opposed to stoking fear about them, and perhaps most important of all, learning legitimate lessons from past experience. And those themes are what we focused on again and again throughout this volume, and all the authors here, not just in the writing for this volume, but in much of the work that they do, have been devoted to trying to call the public's attention to what's gone wrong, and hopefully, people will recognize that we're voting in the coming election without taking any kind of partisan approach to what may be coming up. Let me briefly introduce the three panelists. David Cole, who will speak first, is the author of Enemy Aliens, Double Standards and Constitutional Freedoms in the War on Terrorism. And he has a book coming out in September as well titled Less Safe, Less Free, Why We're Losing the War on Terror. He's a law professor at Georgetown University, who many of you I'm sure are familiar with. Ann Beeson, who will speak next, just started a new job yesterday. She's the director of domestic programs for the Open Society Institute. Before that, she had worked for a number of years at the ACLU, really fighting in the trenches in many of the important court cases that have come up on the issues that are addressed in the book. And so she really has been fighting the good fight and in some cases actually winning the good fight. And then finally, Stephen Schulhofer, law professor at New York University,